The following may contain offensive language, adult humor, and or content that some viewers may find offensive. The views and opinions expressed by any one speaker does not explicitly or necessarily reflect or represent those of Mark Radulich or W2M Network. Please listen with caution, or don't listen at all.
There'll be spectacle, there'll be fantasy, there'll be daring do and stuff like you would never see.
Be a movie. Yeah, we're gonna be a movie.
Starring everybody
And me. There'll be heroes bold, there'll be comedy, and a lot of fuss that ends for us real happily. Be a movie. We can watch it all develop. Starring everybody.
And me. We'll take the world and set it on its ear.
Come on, join in. We're gonna start right here.
And we are going to start right here. Hello, you are listening to a Radulich Broadcasting premiere podcast triple feature. But that's not what I came here to tell you. What I came here to tell you is, come on, God, answer me. For years, I'm asking you why. Why are the innocent dead and the guilty alive? Where is justice? Where is punishment? Or have you already answered? Have you already said to the world, here is justice. Here is punishment. Here in me. Biohazard, damn it. Punishment for all my sins. Yeah, Pat doesn't know this, but we're absolutely going Metal Hammer of Doom and just talking Biohazard tonight. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, well, see, I was going to sneak in Megadeth with the punishment due, but
You can go either way. So, yes, this is triple feature, first one of the year, and we're having fun. We're back to having fun on the Radulich Broadcasting Network, Pat. Just doing stuff just to do it.
fun's been missing.
The fun, the thrill was gone for a while, for about a 2-year period. I don't know why, though.
Well, I do, because you were watching movies that came out that you thought you had to talk about, and when you have to do something as opposed to wanting to do something, it's not fun, it's work.
Yeah, that's true.
And you saw some shit over the past 2 years, let me tell you.
Yeah. But we're back to having fun, and I'll tell you, I have been wanting to talk about at least one or two of these Punisher movies for a few years now. I think I tried to sneak them in when they were doing the Netflix show, when he showed up in Daredevil, and it just never happened. And there was always a reason why we kept putting it off. And then we were having a conversation in our chat, and we were just kind of going back and forth. And Pat and I were just like, why don't we just do all three Punisher movies as a triple feature? Like, stop playing around. Stop trying to find synergy. Just have some fun. So Pat Mullin is here to have some fun with me. How you doing, Pat?
If I do nothing else, it's have fun. And
This is
damn it,
very true.
I'm committed to more of it.
You know, when I think about Pat Mullin, I think about that he just wants nothing but a good time. A good time.
And it don't get better than this.
It does not. Talk dirty to me, Pat. No. All right. So we're talking the Dolph Lundgren Punisher 1989, the Thomas Jane Punisher 2004, and then the Ray Stevenson Punisher Warzone from 2008. Let's go back. I know one of the reasons why I wanted to do this was I had actually never seen the Dolph Lundgren Punisher. I know this is the first time. This is actually the first time I've seen it. I knew the speech because I was a Biohazard fan, and that speech is the beginning sample to Punishment by Biohazard on the Punishment album. But I never actually saw the movie, and then I saw the Canon documentary on Netflix, and I love that documentary. It's like one of my favorites.
Electric Boogaloo, man.
Yes, sir. And they talked about the Punisher movie. That particular intellectual property was sold by Marvel when they were having a fire sale of their properties. So give me a little background here, because you have a memory for these sort of things that I don't. how did Punisher end up with Cannon, and how did Cannon end up making this movie?
So if you remember, Canon at one point would spend millions of dollars they don't have to get properties and then make the money back by selling advertisements that these movies were being made before they ever started making the movie in order to fund the movie to get made. That was their odd, wonky process that eventually ruined the company. But Marvel was selling off a lot of its properties. Actually, the first Marvel cinematic feature was Howard the Duck, which you did a watch along with your son and one of his friends, I believe.
Yes, sir. Duck boobs. Woo.
Yeah. Um, but Canon scooped up a bunch of Marvel properties, including Spider-Man, Captain America, and The Punisher. Now, Captain America did eventually get made under the 21st Century Films banner, which was Joran Globus. When he split from Canon, he retained those rights. Menahem Golan did not make the Spider-Man film, which he had procured the rights to and held on to. The Punisher movie, because the budget was seemingly significantly lower in cost than those two movies would have been, was actually the first one that went into production and was eventually distributed by New World Pictures after being financed by Canon. Because this is during the Canon real split apart in 89, 90. So that was the first one that wound up being made. They did it in Australia, is where it was filmed. I think it's kind of visible to most people when you see the outskirts of everything. It's very clearly not New York or Los Angeles or, a major United States metropolitan area. That being said, in terms of star power in the movie, you have Dolph, who is signed to a few Canon films at that point, not the least of which was Masters of the Universe.
Right.
Probably his best known starring vehicle to this point, where he is the lead. And he'll do a couple more. This year, the same year as The Punisher, he also stars in the cult classic Red Scorpion. So he's getting a lot of playback. And the idea of Dolph as the Punisher is interesting because he's known as this big, blonde, not necessarily a street-looking guy like the Punisher is often thought of. But when you see him in the part, he looks good.
He does.
And this is actually the second Marvel motion picture made after Howard the Duck.
So let's take a time out here. You offered to do this. We were talking about it, and you're like, yeah, let's talk these three Punisher movies. You're a huge comic book fan. You're actually, when I was talking about why some of our friends are rooting for the death of Disney, you were one of the people I was defending. And it's because you're a huge comic book fan, and in many ways you don't feel like the company has done right by comic book fans. We don't need to get into any of that, but I wanted to say that for you. That being said, where does the Punisher rank in your fandom of comic book characters?
When I was really getting into comics on my own and choosing characters to pick up rather than the hand-me-downs that, I would get from my dad, Punisher was very different, man, because the Punisher was cool. He was not a hero. He was the guy who was cleaning up the streets with murder. He was crossing those lines that heroes didn't cross. That's why he wasn't a superhero. He is a murderous vigilante, and clearly inspired by the movie Death Wish in his story. But the Punisher was one of those characters that I just kind of got enamored with because as a little kid, you have a moral compass, but you also don't understand why these guys continually break out of jail only to, do the same things they did before.
Yeah, it's the Batman thing.
And why isn't there
Batman doesn't kill anyone, so the Joker gets out of Arkham every other day and kills 500,000 people.
Right. And as a kid, you can't do math and you don't see the bigger picture. So to me, the Punisher was means to an end in a lot of ways for a lot of these guys. It was interesting that he had a handful of recurring villains that he couldn't get to despite his means of finishing them off. Jigsaw, Bushmaster, a couple other guys like that. Obviously, the Kingpin.
Right.
But he was always an interesting character to me. And then they go into the background of he was a Nam-veteran and, all these things. And I was like, man, and he's just a regular dude fighting all these guys. And he's just the ultimate killing machine. This guy rocks. And so I was a big Punisher fan early on. I was a Punisher fan for a long time. They kind of ruined him a little bit for a little while. The Marvel Knight series where he came back to life after being killed as a ghost demon hunter. They did some stupid things. I'm not a big fan.
At one point, he was Ghost Rider.
Yeah, Cosmic Ghost Rider. I'm not a big fan of the Garth Ennis stuff, the way he rewrites his origin, because then it takes all the sympathy away from the character and just makes him a murdering scumbag. So I don't love that.
I don't know this. I've always thought that the origin of the Punisher was his family is killed in a picnic, and then he proceeds to start killing mobsters because they were responsible.
So,
What did Garth Ennis do?
summarizing it, there's a miniseries called Punisher Born that summarizes Frank's time in Nam. Frank's whole platoon is ambushed and he's on the verge of being killed. And he makes a deal with the Angel of Death that he basically willingly sacrifices his family to become this killing machine that will be allowed to
Oh, are
survive.
you serious?
Yeah, it's very stupid.
That has got to be right up there with one day more or whatever the hell it's called.
Yeah, it's
A
very
way
stupid.
of ruining a character.
I don't think I've liked almost anything Garth Ennis has ever written. So,
was Garth Ennis responsible for Welcome Back, Frank?
part of it, yes.
Okay. Welcome Back, Frank is good. We did that on source material.
He did most of the Mac stuff, like Welcome Back, Frank,
Right.
Kitchen Irish, like stuff like that. But I just don't like what he does with the character overall.
That's fair. So my experience with the character, I was aware that he started off in Spider-Man. In fact, that issue of Spider-Man for at least at one time. Who knows with comic books now? But at one point, that was a very hard to find issue, and it was a very expensive issue.
Amazing Spider-Man 129.
Yeah, because it was the first appearance of Punisher, and he was a villain, and it was one of those moral clashes where, Spider-Man tries to save people, including the villains. There's a way to stop these people semi-peacefully so that you are not going down a dark path, and he's confronted with the Punisher, who says, no. There's no way to deal with the criminal element except to put a bullet in the head. These people are unrepentantly evil. It's an interesting moral conversation because it's one that I think we have in everyday life. And that is, there are people who feel like evil is real and there's no saving it. There's no fixing it. It just is what it is. And it should be put down with as much force as you can muster. And then there's a more modern Judeo-Christian approach to everyone is savable and there is no evil. We are all sort of, products of our environment and upbringing and all of that. And so essentially anyone can be redeemed. I'm not going to get into a whole thing about that. It's just, those are the two sides of the coin. And I know for myself, I read comic books as an element of fantasy, and, I love Jesse Starcher to death, but he calls himself street level Starch and just thinks the Punisher. Like if you've ever seen him on a podcast, he has a thing hanging up behind him that says Punisher. It's the Punisher logo. That is not why I read comic books.
Yeah, the original Punisher logo, not the sissy one they make him have now.
That is correct. The OG Punisher logo.
Yeah.
I read comic books for fantasy. I read comic books I enjoyed the moral stories in comic books. I loved Captain America. That was my guy. I liked the idea of a character who stood above everyone else, had a solid moral compass. And the first act of a hero is to save people. Before you punch the Red Skull, it's always make sure the civilians are always safe. So I loved Captain America, and I didn't read Punisher. I didn't really like Punisher because
he's a murderous vigilante.
Yeah, that wasn't for me. That's not why I read comic books. So it did nothing for me. It was part of the reason why I never really I chased down the Dolph Lundgren Punisher film. Because in 1989, I'm 13, which means it was available to me. I would have found it, but I don't care. I didn't care about the character.
But it's also funny because next year in 1990, Marvel debuts their first line of action figures with Toy Biz, and who is heavily featured in a thing marketed for children, the Punisher.
Yeah, look,
he has multiple variants of this figure, the van, like the whole shebang.
So on a previous podcast, I said, the single worst thing to ever happen to comic books was the obsession with Ghost Rider, Wolverine, and Punisher. Like it ruined comic books. But I say that because I'm kind of mad at comic book fans, because every comic book fan was in love with Punisher, Ghost Rider, and Wolverine, and they were everywhere and they were in everything. Wolverine at one point was in 97 different teams,
including the series where all three of them were together.
Yes, which we also reviewed on source material. Yeah. So all of that to say that I've come to enjoy the Punisher as an expression. First, he's that almost humanistic power fantasy. We can all be the Punisher. Takes one bad day, one Job experience, and any single one of us, because it doesn't take superpowers to get a machine gun and mow down gangsters. So, and it's one, you kind of said it before. It's one of those where when you're feeling like you have no power, when you're feeling like the things are just out of reach, and you want to exert your power, the Punisher is a great power fantasy for a lot of boys, a lot of young men, a lot of old men. What I can guarantee, I could point to at least 40 or 50-year-olds that'd be like, boy, would I like to take a machine gun and just have my way with people.
I mean, you're talking a character very much in the vein of, like we said, the Charles Bronson, Paul Kersey
Right.
character in Death Wish.
Dirty
Bernard
Harry,
Getz, Subway Vigilante.
right.
Michael Douglas in Falling Down. Like all these very relatable characters where if you didn't have this restraint to hold yourself in and understand, what it is right and wrong, and you just snap and cross that line, here you go.
Yeah, it's so funny because, like, even in modern society now, and I know I've talked about this recently, where people don't trust the government, they don't trust the police, they don't trust a lot of our social structures, and they were just like, you know what, I'll do it myself. The people that very much value the right to bear arms are the ones going, no one can protect me but me. And these are the people who are very much like the Punisher. Like, that's my guy. Again, that's the power fantasy, and any age, any person can have that. So all of that being said about the Punisher, let's get into Punisher 89. This one is told kind of in flashback. The idea here is Punisher has already been doing his thing, and I'm not going to read the plot synopsis. I'm just kind of like very basic stuff here. The Punisher's been doing his thing. He's dealing with the mob bosses. He's dealing with various gangsters, and kind of like the Dark Knight, they're like, we've about had enough of you. There were warring factions within the gangs, and at some point, a Japanese mafia family shows up, and they kidnap the children of the American gangs. And there's a really great conversation between the guy that is working with the Punisher and the Punisher about like, hey, I've been trying to help you all this time. I kind of believe in you. You need to go save these kids. And he was like, I punish the guilty. And he was like, well, what did the kids do?
Yeah.
Like, And so at first, Dolph Lundgren's Punisher is very much like this very like sullen, depressed, angry vigilante of sorts. And he doesn't want to get involved in the thing with the kids because the kids are the children of the gangsters. And he was like, nope. If my mission statement is to punish the guilty and save the innocent, the kids are still innocent, and I have to go get them. And so he goes and he saves the children. And then it leads to a final conflict with a very bloody final conflict with the gangs. And he mows them down, and that's that's more or less the end of the movie. Was there any details that you wanted to fill in real quick before we talk about this?
So I don't know if you want me to do like necessarily a summarization or just like key elements from the movie that I enjoyed, or what they
just take the ball and run, baby.
All right. So as far as characterization goes, when you talk about him being very depressed, withdrawn, sullen, that's a really good interpretation of the Punisher. Okay, like that's a really good way to do it. The Punisher is a broken man. That's why he's on this never-ending quest for vengeance. His family's gone. They're dead. Now, they take a little bit of liberty with it in this one. Instead of being accidental witnesses to a mob hit in the park, Frank was a cop, and his family was targeted with a car bomb. Let's just get to the theater, right?
Right.
So his partner Lou Gossett Jr., is on his trail for all this time. There's a lot of things they get right, but the thing they get most right to me is Dolph understanding this character of he's a single-minded, vengeance-driven killer of bad guys, or who he deems bad guys. In particular in this case, it's generally the mob and the Yakuza, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why initially it's like, okay, well, the kids are paying for the sins of the father. It is what it is. Maybe the fathers deserve this. And then Shake, the old homeless man who uses an accomplice and an informant, kind of gets involved and kind of gets him a reality check a little bit. And so he saves the kids. Of course, it ends up with him having to do more than what he bargained for in the first place.
Right.
But there's a lot of key components in the dialogue in this where I really think they actually find the character and do it well. one of them is when Lou Gossett Jr. is yelling at him in the jail cell, and he goes, "What the hell do you call 125 murders in 5 years?" And Dolph just kind of looks at him blankly and says, "Work in progress." Stuff like that. And
that's a very greedy Judd. Comment. I don't know if people know this, but the sheriff of Polk County here in Florida was asked, "Why did you fire 1,000 bullets into that house?" And he says, "Because we ran out."
They're very much in that vein, but that's how he
Mhm.
sees it. It's a never-ending mission. He's not done at 120. He's not done till they're all wiped out or he's dead. One or
Right.
the other, whichever comes first. And there's moments like that. There's the end of the film is probably to me the most Punisher moment of anything, where after, not to spoil it for you guys, but it's been out since 1989. Sucks to be you. Sorry. After the Punisher and Johnny Franco, the mob leader, have pretty much killed all of the Yakuza occupying this building to get Johnny's son Tommy back. At the end, Johnny decides to kill the Punisher. Doesn't work out for him, obviously. Punisher kills Johnny. And Tommy, the son, picks up a gun and points it at the Punisher. Punisher just gets down on his knees, takes the gun and puts it to his head and challenges Tommy to do it, in a very dark, disturbing moment. And then Tommy just kind of freaks out and starts crying. And he goes, "You're a good boy, Tommy. Stay that way. Because if not, I'll be coming for you."
It's a very powerful scene. Like, I went into this thinking that it was going to be dopey because Superman 4. But I actually think that there are elements of this and elements of Punisher Warzone that if you took those two movies and kind of mash them together, you have a solid Punisher movie.
Yeah, do you know the biggest reason people shit on this movie, Mark?
What's the biggest reason, Pat?
He doesn't wear the skull.
It's hey, look, considering I have seen you make a very big deal out of very particular points that, in my opinion, don't matter, that's a solid comic book complaint.
But that's the only thing that people shit on. They'll ignore the whole plot, the acting, performance, everything.
I also think it's the company that made it. This is a company that's responsible for Masters of the Universe and Superman 4. There's a bit of being guilty by association.
Okay, but it's not like every canon film is a bad film. They've had Oscar noms, thrown in there.
That's fair. I want to read Ronnie's comment here. A friend of the show, Ronnie, and one of my good buddies, says people don't understand that he's doing this for his family. In early storylines, he was going into the priesthood before going into the military, which I think is a really interesting point. I read the line, "Come on, God, for years I'm asking you why." And one of the often, I think, neglected elements of the Punisher character is his Catholicism. That he was a very... I brought up Job before, and I think there's a lot of parallels between the Punisher and Job in the sense that, here was this righteous fellow who was tested, and whereas Job remains devout, Frank questions his faith, and why would God do this to me?
I still talk to God sometimes. I ask him if what I'm doing is right or wrong.
Right. And I think that's an essential element to the Punisher character, and that when it's absent, it's like Punisher name only. As a film, now just looking at this as a the film craft of it, I think I agree with you because you and I talked before the show about who's the best Punisher, Dolph, Thomas Jane, or Ray Stevenson, and I think we both agreed that I think Dolph got the closest. That maybe he's not in the best movie, but he's the best version of the Punisher of these three movies. I'm not counting the John Bernthal stuff. No. The movie in and of itself, and I was thinking about this as I watched all three of these, how much the first one and the third one are like slasher flicks. Like there's almost a horror element to Punisher 89, and that's where we'll keep our focus for the time being for the sake of conversation.
The way they film that scene of Punisher and Johnny Franco going through the multi-levels of the Yakuza headquarters where it's in red light for a while.
Right.
That's straight out of a slasher movie. And then you have these, at one point there's somebody breaking through a wall to get him. And, there's the suit of armor behind him that looks like it's going to come to life. And that's very slasher movie.
Yeah, it was like they really did treat the Punisher like he was a horror monster. And I think that's an interesting interpretation of this character.
Yeah. And again, not to mention the body count associated with it, which is impressive to say the least.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because if I had forgotten to say it, I'd have been mad at myself. We talk a lot on this podcast network about movies unrepentantly made for men who enjoy violent movies. And for that reason alone, this should be a fucking modern a classic. It's like this is almost to the point of parody.
I think it's
unrepentantly violent.
Yeah, I know that there's, like All Out of Bubblegum. I don't use them, but it's basically a movie website. All Out of Bubblegum, takes it from Roddy Piper. They a lot of times they do kill count videos, and they,
Hmm.
the on-screen kill count. Lundgren has 76 confirmed kills in this movie.
Reminds me of Hot Shots, where they've got the body count counter, like most violent
Yeah,
movie of all time.
that's what it's.
I have to
Yeah,
say, and we can move on to the Thomas Jane one if you want after this, but it's not the worst movie I've ever seen. It's better than it had any right to be. I think if it wasn't kind of cheaply made, because the budget on this thing is $9 million. It was actually profitable. It made $30
yeah,
million. And it was it was released in the United States, but I think it was only a limited release in
it was
1991.
very limited.
Yeah. You want to talk about that real quick?
Yeah, sure. I mean, most of us didn't even get to see this movie or know it existed until it hit video shelves.
Right.
And that really wasn't until 1990 for most of the country. So really a year after its release, almost it got it.
Hmm.
And then it found its way eventually onto, like, again, Mark and I grew up in the New York tri-state area for most of our lives. The Channel 11 Sunday afternoon movie. It wasn't necessarily a premium cable movie as such. It was network because it didn't cost as much for them to air it. So it was pretty easy for them to get broadcast rights, and it would be on a Saturday night or Sunday afternoon for, like, the kids to watch at night, or the next day to occupy them while the parents had to do whatever, whether it was date night or what have you.
My only other complaint about this movie, and then we can move on, I'll let you invest and then we can move on, is I think internally, Dolph's sort of struggle as the Punisher is about the only depth the movie has. It's kind of a glorification of violence, which is fine. You can have those things, but I'm glad we're doing it as a triple feature and not as like an on trial or God help me, damn you Hollywood, because I could not spend an hour talking about this movie. There's not that much there. That's kind of my thing. Like, before everyone attacks me, I'm fine with that. It's really okay. But I have to call things out that I see. It's a shallow movie, save for his characterization and performance.
Yeah, I mean, you've got, again, Louis Gossett Jr. playing somebody named Berkowitz. Did we really think that through? Not just the name Berkowitz, but the fact that that name is very ethnic and not Louis Gossett Jr. ethnic. And I'll leave that kind of there.
I don't even want to acknowledge it, but I'm going to put it on screen just because I'm a nice fella.
Yeah, I mean, the hell. But yeah, the Nancy Everhard is trying, she's the one who's trying to be his partner, and he doesn't work with a partner. His partner used to be Frank.
It was so
very
fucking
shallow.
cliche. My God,
Yeah.
that was right out of the How to Write a Cop movie instruction manual.
Yeah, it's very shallow in that sense. It's not very developed on anything, like you said, other than Dolph and his internal kind of struggle with what he's doing. And I'm fine with that because I think he does it well, but the movie lacks elsewhere significantly. And again, it does look cheaply made. It looks like a made-for-TV action movie as opposed to a true actioner.
I think that's also why it doesn't get the credit that it deserves, because you and I are sitting here talking about it and we're giving it its fair due. But I think because of the production company and then the aesthetic, people are like, oh, this is shoddy because it looks like shit.
And what contemporary film was released that same year with it? Batman by Burton.
Right. Ugh.
Yeah.
Speaking of movies that ruin film, I'm gonna get in trouble for that. All right. My question to you before we move on to Thomas Jane is, how close to the comic book, besides what we've already talked about? Like, if you're a comic book purist and you're like, I want all the side characters, I want all the adaptations, I want all the stories, how close does the 89 version get?
It's not bad. It's really not. Because again, you're talking about in The Punisher, there's a lot of disposable characters along the way because of his finality of dealing with them. Tons of mobsters who we see in one issue are gone, at the end of it, and will never be seen again because they've been murdered. Kind of the key Punisher, secondary characters are Microchip, who is not present in this movie. He's kind of almost replaced with Shake as a street level informer.
Right.
And again, I probably did that for budget constraints, because to get a character like Microchip to have the access to things he does would probably cost more than they were willing to spend. And also because it's a short, breezy movie, you have to introduce him somehow and give him a little backstory how he has this relationship with the Punisher, as to being opposed to being a homeless old drunk who has his ear to the streets. I get
I'd
it.
say he's kind of my favorite character besides, the actual Punisher.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean,
he has
he's
some
great.
really great lines in the movie. Like I'm a thespian. You're a what? An actor.
Any spare change for an old thespian? Yeah.
So
He's
good.
great in that part, but
Yeah.
again, the Punisher is one of those characters where you don't need a ton of the secondary characters to make a decent story out of it.
Right.
And I think they did a fair job here. Obviously, the origin's altered somewhat, but not a ton. It's told in flashback in that sense. He's already been the Punisher, like we said, and established as that. So you kind of don't waste time going into
Right.
it. I mean, this movie kicks off with a bang and kind of almost never stops with the body count, which is what it's exactly supposed to do.
Yeah. Look, if you're looking for a movie for guys who like movies and just unrepentant, shallow violence with a little bit of depth in the central character, look no further than The Punisher 1989. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I think it nails a lot of what makes the Punisher, as
Yeah.
opposed to some other offerings that we'll discuss in a second.
All right, so this next one is the worst of the three.
Oh,
that might be a controversial statement because it's kind of like the most slickly made. It's the most mainstream. But
what a piece of shit it is, though.
I tell you what, when I first watched the 2004 Thomas Jane Punisher, famously shot in my current home city of Tampa, I think I appreciated it for its mainstream approach to the Punisher, and because Kevin Nash was in it, and I'm a huge Kevin Nash mark, as we all know. Watching it today, what a silly piece of nonsense this is. Like, if I had to, if you gave me like 3 attributes and said pin one of these to each one of these movies, and one of them was Punisher in name only, I would pin it to this one.
Yep.
This is barely a Punisher movie. Like, so one of my big criticisms about a lot of movies is sometimes they get the look of things. Like a lot of these, like, Zack Snyder's, Tim Burton's, are very good with visuals. They know how to bring a comic book panel to life. They don't know how people work. But boy, do they know how to make a scene look like a thing that you recognize. And just in visuals, like they would be really great for silent movies. The worst thing that happened to Zack Snyder was the talkies. So anyway, having said that, I think they do a good job of making Thomas Jane look like the Punisher, especially in the last act. And I think they give him some fun action sequences, but this is barely an actual Punisher movie. Go ahead and kind of give your first initial thoughts here, and I'll give some demographic information when you're done.
Yeah, it doesn't have any of what makes the Punisher involved in it. For as much as they try to take visual inspiration from the books, like you talked about, like the fight with Kevin Nash, the fight with the Russian, which is pretty much almost panel for panel from the Punisher comic book, which is why that part of the movie is probably one of the only enjoyable parts of the movie, that fight sequence between them. But the things they do in this, where they decide to expand on his origin by having the mob go to Puerto Rico to slaughter his entire family, not just the wife and children, but cousin Ed and Aunt Sheila and, your confirmed bachelor Uncle Roy and all that stuff, it was just so poorly made in terms of understanding the characters. And on top of the bad writing, this is maybe the most hammy performance from John Travolta you will ever see in anything.
No, Pat, I have 2 words for you. Face Off.
No, this is worse.
You're out of your fucking mind, dude.
No, this is worse. Face Off, he's supposed to like chew it up like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like this fucking piece of shit. Oh God, it's so bad. And again, you're balancing him off of Thomas Jane, who, as much as he looks like the Punisher and people love his voice, which is why they got him to do the video game, like he really doesn't do anything good. He doesn't emote well in this. He doesn't, no, he's better as Edmund Turnblad. I swear to God, he really is.
Hey, if you're acknowledging it, you have to read it.
Okay, so our pal Ronnie, I have one word for you: Hairspray, the remake that Travolta was in, is cross-dressing as Edmund Turnblad, which is how he dresses in real life, from my understanding too. But no, he absolutely was better in Hairspray than he was in this. This is maybe the low point of his acting career, other than maybe Domestic Disturbance or.
Yeah, John Travolta's like post Pulp Fiction comeback is rocky at best.
The highs are high. Get Shorty's great. This is not.
Oh my god, Get Shorty's like one of my. It's in my top 20 favorite movies.
Yeah, this is not Get Shorty, John Travolta.
No, this is. And again, Ronnie and I were actually supposed to talk about Face Off at one point. We were going to do like a triple feature of Nicolas Cage movies, and just time gets away from us. So maybe we'll get to it one day. But one of the reasons why I think like Face Off was suggested was because John Travolta is so over the top hammy in that movie.
I'd even argue Broken Arrow over Face Off, but that's another discussion for another day.
It is.
But in this movie, again, you have Wooden Thomas Jane, over the top hammy John Travolta. They get so little of why he's and the whole message of the movie and the tagline, it's not vengeance, it's punishment. No, it's absolutely vengeance.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop. Okay, so now I have to talk about the plot for this thing, because essentially he's an FBI agent, he's undercover, he's fucking with this mob family that is John Travolta's mob family, and they figure out that it's him, so they go to Puerto Rico, they blow his whole family away, and then he is shot at point blank range in the chest and kicked into the water.
Yep.
But by the grace of God and the Jesus effect, he is resurrected and he is nursed back to health, and he decides, and then here's the key elements why I wanted to discuss this, because I really hate this, I didn't notice it in 2004. I noticed it now because I have to think critically about these things, and I'm like, what a horrible plot this is.
Yeah.
There's the outright killing, the outright vengeance of somebody going, an eye for an eye. I must make the people pay who hurt me, which I can respect. Then there's what this motherfucker does, where he uses Loki's trickery to fucking get John Travolta.
Subterfuge.
He tricks John Travolta into killing his henchman, his best friend, and his wife. By using lies and subterfuge and and then at the end he mocks him.
Yeah.
Thomas Jane's standing over John Travolta and he's like, I got you to kill your whole family. And then in the dumbest thing I've ever seen, like sets the car off, and you hear John Travolta whee as he's being dragged by this car, and then they do an overhead and the cars will start blowing up, which they might as well have put the William Tell overture in that scene. And then, of course, the cars fucking make the Punisher logo out of fire, which was a cool effect, but it's something we'll see also stupid in The Dark Knight Rises and in a few other places. Like, it was cool in one place where it kind of made sense to me, and that was Fight Club. But other than that, these people who are like performance art, with their fiery effects and, and things, it's like it looks cool in the movie, but then when you think about, when did you have time to do this?
Yeah, your whole mission is supposed to be vengeance for the sake of your family being murdered. So you decide to go on Etsy and figure out how to do this? Like, what is this? And this movie, if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure I do. I think it came out either the same weekend or the weekend after as Kill Bill Volume 2 in 2004. And I really wanted to see that. Like, and you know what? I had very low hopes for this Punisher movie based on everything I'd seen. And my friends were like, no, come on, it's the Punisher. We got to see it. We got to see it. Duh. And keep in mind, these are guys who really didn't read much of the comics. Mm-hmm. Maybe they read some of the Garth Ennis Max stuff, and that's it. But like they came out of it and they were like, "Oh man, that was great." Those guys, what movie were you fucking watching?
So I want to read this real quick because I want to get your reaction to it. The film story and plot were mainly based on two Punisher comic book stories: the 1994 miniseries The Punisher Year One, written by Dave Abnett and Andy Lanning, and the 2000-2001 miniseries Welcome Back, Frank by Garth Ennis. Though some scenes were derived from other Punisher stories, such as Marvel Preview Presents The Punisher #2, Marvel Superhero Action featuring The Punisher #1, The Punisher Warzone, and The Punisher War Journal.
Yeah. The popsicle torture scene is from straight out of one of those. Mm-hmm. But again, taking the scene and making it visual doesn't mean you understand why it's happening and what you're doing with it. And that's kind of the clear thing you were talking about earlier with people like Zack Snyder and Tim Burton. For as much as they can translate on the screen, that's why the fight with the Russian works. It's mindless action because that's what it is in the book. It's fine. That's one of the only things in this movie that works. The rest of it, it's not put in proper context where it's used. It's done not very well. And it's trying to win over comic fans by being, look, we're taking stuff right off the panel and putting it in.
Well, it makes an assumption the comic book fans are like plumb retarded.
Yeah.
And look, some of them are. If I may speak for the trees for just a moment, there are some people, maybe some of these were your friends, who they saw it in the book, they saw it on the screen, and their lizard brain said it's good.
Yeah.
And when you're banking on most of your audience thinking that way, you can get away with this sort of nonsense.
Yeah, definitely one of them. I won't name his name, Brian, but yeah. So that's what that is. But again, then you have him shacking up with the freaks and like trying to give him a subplot of a surrogate family of freaks and like. Do you guys understand anything that you're writing? Like what the hell? It's a mess overall in terms of the action beats of the story. Like to be objectively just speaking about a movie and the craft.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And aside from all the other issues we've talked about, besides not understanding the character and what makes it tick, besides not understanding the actual story and what makes it, not necessarily relatable, but kind of to the audience, like we talked about, where, again, the power fantasy, the revenge fantasy,
right.
Those elements to it. It's really just a lot of stuff there is ambiguous and you're left to try to do the math on your own.
That's the thing, like I said before, the Punisher's not my favorite character because I like my characters to be a little bit more pure of heart, a little more, a little more paladin, and less roguish. However, I can at least identify with the Dolph Lundgren Punisher and the Ray Stevenson Punisher of my life is over. I'm sort of just the spirit of death now.
Yeah.
But I still have a moral code to this, as opposed to this guy who it's like they were trying to be too cute by half by writing around that and saying, oh, I made you do it. I tricked John Travolta into doing the dirty work for me. And I'm like, one, not the Punisher.
No.
Two, that's a shitty thing for someone to do. Now I don't like this guy. You've now made me not like the hero of your picture.
100%. This is why. That's probably the clearest excerpt of how they don't understand the character.
Yeah. Yeah, this was not... I mean, I think if you take the Punisher's name off of this, it's still not a great movie. There's some fun like you said, the high point of this movie is his fight with Kevin Nash.
Yeah.
And it's just because it's so brutal. Him throwing the hot water in Kevin Nash's face and burning him. Like that all looks cool.
Nash actually got stabbed. It wasn't a prop knife. It was an accident, and he really got stabbed.
Even better. I even like the bit with the guitar assassin, where they have the chase on the bridge. Knife. Yeah. It's like, oh, you stupid asshole. You brought a knife to a gunfight. Ka-ching. Like, I could laugh at that. But that's it. Like, Thomas Jane and Rebecca Romaine are nice looking people with zero sexual chemistry between the two of them. I don't know how as a casting director you let that happen on screen. If that's supposed to be your romantic interest of sorts.
Which again, too, like it's one of those things where, Punisher's not falling in love again, but he has needs. He does stuff over the course of time. Like, he still enjoys the company of a woman once in a while because he's a man and he's got testosterone built up in him and he's got to get it out. The poisons have to leave the building. But zero. At least make us think he has to really struggle with this and put his, the memory of his family first. And this is why he's on this crusade.
Right.
Instead, they're trying to make it where he's, trying not to fall in love with her. They just do not click at all. I mean, it's really just really bad.
The 89 Punisher has this really great kind of gritty, dark, gloomy Seattle aesthetic. And this one is utterly missing that. Like this was Punisher. It's funny. This was Punisher by Disney before Disney got its hands on the Punisher. Like, what if we take away all the gloomy aesthetic out of Punisher? What if we
Spider-Man the animated series in 1995 making a gloomier Punisher setting than this?
This is not a good interpretation of the Punisher. My only other question to you, just like the first one, how close to the comic book did they get this?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. Again, there's people are going to be, but those panels are straight from, fuck those panels. They weren't put in the right context. The spirit of the character is totally lost in this movie. It's just not good. This is almost as far off from the characters you can get, honestly.
So this one was made on a budget of $33 million.
This was not vengeance. It was punishment.
So this was put out by Lionsgate, barely a studio. It made $54.7 million. It was not profitable by our math, but it definitely made more than its production budget, which, given Lionsgate, who the fuck knows?
Yeah.
It's got a 29% on Rotten Tomatoes.
That's
Just
generous.
a miss all around, and I don't even think this one is like fondly remembered by people. I think like
There's a lot of like it's got a cultish following.
does
Like
it? Okay, that's what I wanted to ask you.
they did like a fan film with Thomas Jane as the Punisher years later that they put out at
Mm-hmm.
San Diego Comic-Con because people wanted him to be the Punisher still. And I don't know, he never clicked as the character for me.
Right.
I didn't see it in him, but there were people who were like ravenously like, no, we need him to be the Punisher. And then, like I said, they did a video game about a year after this came out, unrelated to the movie, but he still provides the voice of the Punisher through the game.
Listen, if they hadn't done John Bernthal as the Punisher in Daredevil, and they brought back Thomas Jane, I wouldn't have been mad at them because I think Thomas Jane with better material would have worked out fine.
I think that's fair. I think he could have done that, but you can only elevate bad material so much when your direction is to be stoic and silent, the whole time. And
I did like the way that like because his family was gone, and it's stupid because it's too soon, but he kind of reverts to that like traumatized Nam veteran where like my I'm talking specifically about the Thanksgiving meal scene where they're all just kind of watching him hover over the plate and eat, and Thomas Jane is doing his best like traumatized soldier eating a meal impression, and I don't know, I thought it was adorable.
I hated that whole scene with the music playing, and I hated it.
Not great.
He might
All right.
might have done well, but I was so zoned out by like hating that scene so much that like
Like I said, I can live with a lot of this movie as I'm watching it if I don't think about being the Punisher. But then I can't get the image of John Travolta being dragged by the car. And I'm just like, all I can think of it is, whee!
Where's Mom? She had to catch a train. Ugh.
Ronnie, I'm going to put this comment on screen. Ronnie has been hanging out with us all show as some others. He didn't click with the fans of the actual book. Okay. I'm so disconnected from comic book fans in a lot of ways that this is good material. I have no idea. And yes, Kevin Ash was the best part of the Thomas Jane one. All right. Our last movie is Punisher Warzone, which was meant to be the sequel to the Thomas Jane Punisher. It was also put up by Lionsgate, but it is in fact a reboot. Yeah. And it's kind of like it's kind of like the Robin Pattinson Batman or the Dark Knight or whatever. Like he's already been in business a while. So this came out in 2008, and it's a reboot. Follows the waged war by vigilante Frank Castle, played by Ray Stevenson. There's a focus on crime and corruption, in particular in the disfigured mob boss known as Billy Jigsaw Rosati, played by McNulty, otherwise known as Dominic West. The film focuses for mature audiences, yada yada yada. All right, so this one was made on a budget of $35 million. It made 10, so this was a huge bomb for Lionsgate, and they fucking gave up after this. So this is an interesting one. I actually kind of like the plot of this. This is one where the Punisher's been in business for a while. He has an insider working for him on the police force, which you don't find out until later. There's been a Punisher task force for a while now, with the cops trying to bring him down. He is known to the mob, and they just can't get a handle on him. And it opens with what we think is a drug deal that the Punisher is going to get involved in, but it's actually a sting operation set up by the cops. But the Punisher doesn't know that. So the Punisher lays waste to everybody and kills a cop, which then puts him at cross bridges with the cop's wife and the kid. And now the Punisher is sort of struggling with the guilt of having killed this father of this child, and a cop. Around the same time, there's also another cop that's trying to bring down the Punisher, and he has been beset by all sides by people who are just willing to let the Punisher keep doing his thing. So he's having a problem. It focuses a lot on, it's kind of like the 89 Batman where, Punisher's been around a while, but what we're really going to focus on is the origin of Jigsaw. So we spend a lot of time with Dominic West. Dominic West is disfigured, becomes Jigsaw. He has a lunatic cannibal overacting brother.
Looney Bin Jim.
Looney Bin Jim. He has to get him out of there. And this all leads to probably my favorite end sequence of any of these three movies. Jigsaw and Jimmy run around town to each of the different. It was like 1997 WWE. Everyone had a faction. He goes to the different factions, and he's like, "Who wants to kill the Punisher?" And they're like, "Me." So 87 people show up to this one fucking building, and the Punisher, needing to now save the now kidnapped wife and kid, goes into the belly of the beast and takes out a small army, and eventually gets down to a shootout with Jigsaw, and he kills him, and he saves the kid, and he saves the wife, and that's the end of that. Anything else? Any other details about this one that I missed that you want to talk about?
So this one has probably not probably, it does. It has the biggest supporting cast from Punisher Comics involved in a movie. We get Microchip in this one. Linus Lieberman, played by Wayne Knight, who I thought did a great job.
Yeah. I'm so used to Wayne Knight being so much more sillier than he is here.
Yeah. Dash Mihawk plays Detective Martin Soap, who's a regular from the comics. I thought he was really, really good in that role. I'm a big fan of Dash and most of his work in general. But I really did like him in this. I thought he did a terrific job. You have, oh my gosh, why am I blanking all of a sudden? Dominic West as Billy Rizzotti, as Jigsaw.
Yeah.
And again, you mentioned Batman '89, where that's not a movie about Batman. That's a movie about the Joker.
Right.
This is a better balance of that, where it features more of the Punisher, and they kind of maybe took some notes from that and said, "Hey, the name of the movie is Punisher Warzone, not Jigsaw." So I think they do enough of the development of the psyche of Billy Rizzotti as Jigsaw and what happened to him, enough to make you understand his motivation without making the entire movie just about him.
Right.
So I think that's competent direction. And yeah, again, in terms of violence, Punisher's known for violence. This is a very violent movie with a high kill count.
Yeah. See what I said about the first one, then multiply it by 10.
Right.
Jesus Christ.
And it's very much more in tune with that than it is the last movie, where he's doing all these Home Alone type traps. He's very much just out there getting shit done and getting his hands dirty.
Yeah.
They do a good job.
Okay, sorry. My favorite kill, because again, you have to approach Warzone the same way you approach 89, like it's a horror movie, because it's kind of shot with the same aesthetic. But my favorite kill in this entire thing is when the free-flowing gymnast Jamaican robbing crew is doing their thing on the rooftops, and he fucking fires a rocket at one of them. And it just incinerates this guy mid-air. It's awesome.
It's tremendous.
I mean, I have seen a lot of movies. I have seen a lot of violence. I have seen a lot of violence in movies. I ain't never quite seen a motherfucker take a rocket mid-jump and
not
him
mid-jump.
just burst like that.
It's kind of a tip of the hat to Death Wish 4, the end of Death Wish 4, where the end of the movie, Bronson shoots the bad guy with the grenade launcher.
Okay.
Like just shoots him and you see the body explode. Like the mannequin.
It's so good, Pat.
Yeah.
I watched this earlier today, and I was like pulling. So I'm going through the project of uploading all of the 2021 video to TikTok. So I have to pull it all now from YouTube. So I watched the Thomas Jane one and the Ray Stevenson one, and it took me that long. It took me several hours to pull all of this video.
Sure.
And so I'm kind of like looking at my screen, watching what I'm doing, back and forth. I was mesmerized by this. I was like, "What? Oh my!"
Yeah,
glued to the fucking screen at that point.
Which I love. That again, it's a movie taking inspiration from the movie that inspired, or series at least that inspired the character too. I love that little tip of the hat. And you're never going to tell me that's not where they got the idea from.
The other thing about that scene is the reaction of the Jamaican guy, because it made it look as if they really killed a person. Like, I'm not saying the acting in this movie is like stellar, but his reaction made me feel like they actually killed the guy. And he's like, "Oh God, what kind of movie am I in?" It's really funny.
I'm in a snuff movie.
There's a couple really fun kills in this. At one point, like Billy, before he turns into Jigsaw, is like talking to this other mob family, and the guy says something insulting. And God, what if life were really like this? He like breaks the stem off a wine glass, and like shoves it through the guy's neck, and they're like, don't insult your host. You're like, you're right. We're sorry. And like pick the body up, like throw it to the side.
Yeah.
It was such a weird. The kill is great, but it was such a funny reaction to it.
Yeah. Just very nonplussed. Like, nah, you got a point. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
You're right. We're wrong. Moving on.
Yeah. But in terms of, like, we talked about how 89, they kind of explore his morality a lot and how his absence of, the absence of his family, his commitment to this mission. In this one, his morality is explored kind of even more, which I like. Because again, he's accidentally killed this innocent man who has a family that has been left behind now. And he tries to watch over them, especially knowing that at a certain point they're going to be targets of Jigsaw. And I love Julie Benz. I love Julie Benz in everything. Julie Benz is amazing. But maybe the most pivotal scene in the movie is the standoff where you have Julie Benz and Microchip each held hostage with a gun pointed at them by Jigsaw's henchmen, and Punisher has to make a choice. He can either have one killed or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And the Irish parkour bad guy is TJ Storm, mocap actor of Godzilla. All right, rock on. Thank you, Ronnie, for that tidbit. But and then so Microchip is essentially saying, Frank, just kill me. Don't worry about her. Just kill me. It's fine. And they, instead Punisher shoots the henchman. Jigsaw shoots Microchip. Punisher shoots Jigsaw. It's exactly what would happen in a Punisher book. It's exactly what that character would do. It made complete sense. It didn't betray the nature of the character. It didn't cop out and save everybody, because that doesn't happen in Punisher books. Somebody's got to die, and eventually somebody does. And I actually think it was a nicer way for Microchip to die than it was in the comics, where they have him turn on the Punisher and become on. It sucked the way they did that, because you were reading this for years, and all of a sudden the guy just turns on him. Didn't love it, but I like the way it played out in this. And also, were they to go forward with it, you've essentially written Micro out in a way that it makes sense, where Frank can continue on his own through certain means.
So nobody saw it, and it did not do well with the critics. And I think part of that is the studio.
Advertising was shit for this movie.
I know it exists because I study movies, and I also, a comic book reader to one extent or another. But I think the average person doesn't even know this movie's out there, which is a shame, because it's really good.
You got like 30 seconds worth of TV time that told you nothing of the plot at all. And, maybe you're going to entice the Punisher fans to come see it because they are acknowledging the Punisher, the character. But it's not as though the Punisher is Spider-Man or Superman, where he's this instantly recognizable figure that people will go see no matter what. I want to say this was released late in I forget when it was released. I want to say it was late in the year. I'm not positive.
Okay, I can answer you. It was December 5th of 2008.
Said December 5th. Right?
Yeah, you fucked up all the way around here. Now I'm realizing that you don't release a Punisher movie at Christmas time.
No, that's the other part of it. Like, you're releasing it during the family movie big time, scene.
Right.
And the only thought process I could have is, do they think they're going to get the alternate audience by doing that? No, because nobody's got that much disposable income when you get all these Pixar movies. Like, I think Polar Express came out that year, and all the friggin' family movies that came out that year that you had to see. Like all kinds of shit like that you're competing with. At least, they had the sense with like the last Punisher movie, that was like a spring release, where again, it was stupid because you released it against Kill Bill, which is another actioner that was definitely going to command a bigger audience. But still, you released it at a better time than the Christmas holiday movie season,
Yeah.
Like, I remember I got this on DVD. Like, I didn't even get to see it in theaters because it wasn't there that long, at least around me. But I got it on DVD, and when I got it on DVD, I was like, holy shit, this is great. Why did nobody see this? And then, like, I remembered, oh yeah, they barely ever advertised it. Theaters carried it for 3 weeks at max at some places.
Yeah.
It just wasn't made available.
I would almost guarantee it was rated R. So,
Oh, it was.
Yeah. So I think that's a lot of things working against this one. But I think if you're like, again, if you're looking for a gritty, violent, unrepentantly violent movie made for men, and you like the Punisher character, I think from a craft standpoint, this is the best made. You and I had said, and I said it earlier, I'm going to repeat this: take Dolph Lundgren and put him in this movie, and put it in the summer. Then I think you have a hit on your hands. I think the problem here was just nobody saw it. I also think it's critically, I think it's antithetical to what most mainstream critics want to see in a movie,
Of
which
course it
is, not an unrepentantly violent movie for men.
Yeah, that's a fact. Us hyping up Dolph in this role. It's not to say Ray Stevenson did a bad job. I actually thought Ray Stevenson was very, very good. It's just
My thought on Ray Stevenson in this is that he's not bad. He's subtle, almost to the point of being underwhelming.
it's there's that element to it, but also it's just again, I don't think he gets the moments to shine the way Dolph did in that movie.
Sure.
And say whatever you want to say about Dolph Lundgren as an actor. Like there's always the joke about him, when they find out he was the lead in He-Man, Stallone's like, you gave him lines. Like, but he got that character and he nailed it. Even
Right. That's the thing.
didn't
Like
get a ton.
Ray Stevenson. So I talked about Thomas Jane. The best thing about his Punisher is that he looks the part.
Yeah.
And Ray Stevenson, I think, looks less the part than Thomas James. But when it came down to doing the action stuff, like if you watch John Bernthal in the Punisher things, like the way he gets soldier movement very well.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I kept thinking this, like when I went to look for it earlier, I was like, okay, I got to watch Punisher War Journal. It's not Punisher War Journal. It's Punisher War Zone. But I was thinking it was War Journal because when I think of the Punisher, I also think he's a former Nam soldier.
Well, also that was the second Punisher series, Punisher War Journal.
Right. So when I'm watching this movie, I definitely get the Punisher as a former soldier. More so than in the other two movies out of Ray Stevenson. The problem is that's about where he's a former soldier who accidentally killed a cop and now he feels guilty.
Well,
That's his whole character in this movie.
I think it's also too that you just explored the origin 4 years before this.
Right.
So they didn't necessarily want to revisit that, even if they did it right this time and did the mob execution in the park as opposed to we're gonna murder his whole family on this resort in Puerto Rico and it doesn't make any sense and whatever, it's fine. Roy Scheider's there. But yeah, I think that was part of it. So he doesn't necessarily get to have the same depth because there's the assumption you already know where he's coming from.
Yeah. So I told you at the beginning, I think we were going to talk about all three movies, and I just kind of want to do a quick comparison of the three, and then we'll get out of here. We've kind of done that already, but just sort of to round out the discussion, I think there's a great Punisher movie if you took elements of all three of these. If I were to rank them, I think the best made, the best looking, the most closest to what I know to be the Punisher is Punisher Warzone. I think then 89 and then, a distant third is Thomas Jane. The best Punisher is Dolph Lundgren and then Ray Stevenson and then Thomas Jane. And I think if I were to take these three and say, okay, take these three movies and make one solid Punisher movie, I think the plot of having I think the idea of having Jigsaw in it, in the plot from the first one with the characters from the third one probably works really well for me.
I like that, as if you have the reluctant team up of the Punisher and Jigsaw to go at the Yakuza instead of, Punisher and random Johnny Franco, who they made for the movie.
Right.
I definitely think that would have worked better. That movie could have definitely used the third movie's budget to liven some of the things up.
Right. I think the idea that the Punisher accidentally kills a cop is a good one.
Yeah. This is
it's kind of a Dark Knight kind of a thing where like you accept. So in the Dark Knight, they accept that Batman's out there and he's helping and he's sort of assisting where the cops can't quite get to the mob that they want to. And then he's framed for killing Harvey Dent. And so now he's on the run from the cops. If that's your starting point, where you begin the movie the same way, where he kills the cop in the beginning and the cops are now no longer tolerating him, and now it's just an all-out manhunt for the Punisher, I think that's a good starting point for a movie. I think the Punisher versus the cops, and and then he, like you said, he has to team up with Jigsaw, is not a bad one.
I mean, it's difficult because technically the cops are always after the Punisher regardless,
Right, but like I said, they start off with tolerating him, sort of like passively allowing his existence, and now they're aggressively against him.
Yeah, I can see that. I just don't want to overcomplicate things where you make it almost impossible for him to get
Right.
through to the end where he needs to.
Well, I think that's where you have the Jigsaw element of, well, we have Jigsaw who's killing people, and we have the Punisher who killed a cop. Ugh.
But
This
it's how do you force that issue? The
Right.
Yakuza coming in and starting this mini mob war, and then forcing these united families into surrender, pretty much by kidnapping the children, is not a bad
Right.
one.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
Yeah, I will say the only dumb thing about like that thing is when they're having that dinner scene in the first one that I didn't touch on, and they're served the wine, and Lady Tanaka comes in, and like, oh, she poisoned the wine.
Oh my god,
Wine.
it's like that scene from
Glasses.
it's like that scene from the season finale of Justified. It was in the cup.
Yeah, not the wine, the glasses. Like that's more evil. Like that's more clever. They're gonna drink the wine out of the glass. What are we doing here?
Yeah, it was in the cup.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna give you the last word, Pat.
As a character, I love. It's tough to see that there hasn't been a really great adaptation, with the exception of, I would say, that first 4-episode arc of Daredevil season 2.
Oh my god, his speech on the rooftop.
Yeah. I think that 4-episode arc and most of season 1 of John Bernthal's series are probably the best overall adaptations that you've seen. I think season 2 fell off some and kind of lost its way. But I don't blame that on Bernthal, who I thought was great. I think that's the direction of the overall story was poor. But there was still some good in there.
Yeah.
Then you take it back to these films. And again, like Mark said, a couple of them, at least 2 of them, have some very good things in there that can be brought out later if you molded them together the right way. Each of those things had movies had certain things working against it, out of their control to a certain level. The release date for one absolutely killed it as far as being a success. The lack of budget and creative kind of killed the other one. And 2004 was just a train wreck that should be buried and forgotten by everybody.
Yeah,
but there's elements
of it's interesting because like they're saying they're gonna bring John Bernthal's Punisher back. I guess I think they said he's an Echo. I don't know. It dropped on the 9th and I haven't watched it yet.
Yeah, I don't intend to either.
Yeah. 50-50.
Yeah, I love Vinny D, but
there's rumors that they're doing something with the Punisher in this iteration of Marvel. Look, all I'm going to say, and I only bring that up to say this: whatever you're doing with the Punisher, you have to remember who the audience is, and you have to be brave. Which makes me very afraid of what they're going to do with him, because there's not a lot of bravery at Disney right now, and they seem to hate their audience.
They also just don't understand most of these characters, which leads me to believe they really won't understand the Punisher, because this is not a superhero. This is a mass murdering vigilante.
Yeah.
This is not a good guy.
Yeah, don't try to fancy this up. Don't princess it up. Like, if you're gonna do it, that's what if you're gonna do it right, or don't do it at all. I would just let the Punisher be dead, because I don't want to see a Disney princess Punisher.
No, with the fake skull logo, as Ronnie's pointing out, that keep the old skull. Go woke, go broke. But yeah, do make the Punisher the Punisher. Do not make the Punisher Moon Knight or some dumb shit like that. Where he's just not essentially the character that people.
Or if you're gonna do it, then go the other way and be completely ridiculous and make him Cosmic Ghost Rider.
Yeah, but he has to still wear the white go-go boots.
Yes, of course he does, Pat. Of course.
Which, by the way, my favorite. And again, we're talking about how different this character is than the majority of the Marvel universe that he exists in.
Mm-hmm.
That's why my favorite Punisher artist, people hate him, is John Romita Jr., because he gave the book a completely different, gritty, grainy look than all the other books pretty much at the time. I don't want to see John Romita Jr. on Spider-Man or the Avengers, but I want to see him on Punisher. Believe that.
All right, and that is our triple feature here of Punisher movies. This was fun. It's nice to get back to the old Radulich and Broadcasting Network, where we just kind of do stuff, talk films, and have a good time.
Remember we used to have fun and we didn't watch crappy Oscar contenders and shit like that. We just used to watch good movies that we had a blast watching.
I do remember when we used to have fun, Pat.
Yeah.
Speaking of which,
Our
let me bring
resolution for 2024 is more fun, everybody.
That's right. All right. So the next 3 shows Pat's going to be on. He has 2 in February. He's going to be doing a house. 2. Actually, he's going to be history of boxing. We're going to talk Joshua versus Usyk 1 and 2, and that's going to be to set up for the Tyson Fury Alexander Usyk fight on the 17th. And then I'm going to watch it and not commentate on it. So I'm making Pat talk about it after the fight a week later. February 22nd, we'll do another history of boxing, and we will talk all about what happens during the Tyson Fury Alexander Usyk. And then
while also previewing Francis Ngannou, Anthony Joshua.
Yes. The other show that Pat is on, and again, a lesson in pay attention to the chat, Radulich and Broadcasting people. He will be on a triple feature of Josie and the Pussycats, Spice World, and Satisfaction.
Oh my God, yes.
Because we're having fun. We're having fun, Pat.
You know what? That literally defines fun.
Yes. So that's when Pat will be
80s
back.
Justine Bateman, what's up?
Yeah. So next week, speaking of fun, we've got The Beekeeper on Damn You Hollywood. That's Monday. Tuesday, myself and David Wright will be talking Star Trek Lower Deck Season 3. Allegedly, Alexis Hana is threatening to review Echo on the 17th. I might be on that. Robert Winfrey might be on that. Who knows might be on that show. But speaking of fun, Chris Bailey. How do you do? He and I will be doing a long road to ruin for the Flintstones movies.
Is the road that long?
It's not a road. It's not a very long road. But hey, we we had a conversation about it in our chat, and he's been dying to get back on, and I'm not as social as I used to be. So we're packing January with fun, Pat. We used to say it's fuck you, it's January. Now it's fun time January.
That's right. This is the year of fun, everybody.
That's right. 2024 is the year we turn it all around and we start to have some fun.
We're getting real weird with it.
Okay. Anything else before we go?
Throw your suggestions at Mark Radulich on TikTok for various movie trilogies that would make for fun episodes that you want to hear me on. I'm not adverse to taking suggestions.
Very good. All right. Thank you for everyone who tuned in live. We appreciate you. We love you all. Thank you, Pat, for coming on. Pat, I never have to plan a show with you. We always call it a ring brother, and you're like the Will Ospreay to my Kenny Omega. And let me go now before you throw up all over me. Be well. That look of disgust melts my heart. Be well, be safe, and behave.